Hi everybody, how are you doing this week? My name is Evelyn Ikandi, Evermwende here on my YouTube channel, bringing you the week's topic, a very interesting topic, nominal determinism. Does your name determine your life outcome? Does your name determine who you become in life? That's what I'm talking about this week. So keep it here and remember to subscribe to this channel as we talk about this very interesting topic. So do you love your name? Are you proud of it? Do you love the name you were given by your parents? Would you change it, given another chance, given a chance to change it? Or are you just comfortable with it? That's what I'm talking about. And I hope it eventually makes sense to you. So I look at the biblical aspect, being a Christian. I don't know if there's a Muslim aspect to this naming, but I'll talk of what I know and then a bit of psychological concepts and a bit of what psychologists have established about names and the naming patterns. So in the African setting, people name children, culturally, maybe according to the season these children were born, or maybe the children are named after relatives, some cultural practices dictate that the children are named after certain people in their family. For example, the paternal or the maternal grandmothers or grandfathers. That's basically how the African naming happens. And of course, through many other cultural practices dictate how children are named. But the question is, what if a child grows up not liking their name? Do they have a say over that name? What if the name ends up having a negative connotation? Does the child have a right to change it? Because psychologists have established that if a name has negative connotations, it elicits negative emotions. If your name has a negative way of affecting you, of course your life is affected negatively. Psychologists have also established that negative connotations of your name can affect your psychological adjustment, in that it affects your self-esteem, it affects your self-image, it affects your self-identity. Psychologists have established in their research that if your name is positive and you perceive it as positive, the connotations you have of your name are positive, then you are likely to have more positive emotions and you're likely to have more positive outcomes in your life. Very interesting. Interesting. So this is what we call nominal determinism. Your name determining your life outcome, whether positive or negative. Other research was done and findings were very interesting, that some names also affect your physical appearance. I think they called it the Dorian Gray effect. Dorian Gray effect, where some internal aspects affect your physical appearances, including your name. So some people maybe who have a name that connotes joy are likely to have a facial expression full of joy. They're likely to have this hearty laughter because of their internal perception of their name. Meaning that somebody who has a negative connotation to their name, for example, somebody whose name means sadness, will constantly have this feeling of sadness, and eventually it will show on their face. Yeah, very interesting research. And it's interesting that this research has only been done abroad and not here in Kenya. So we hope more psychologists will come up and research on this here in Kenya. Maybe it's going to start from this talk we have today, maybe. So would you change your name given the chance? Are you proud of it? Who were you named after? What were you named after? Were you named after a season, a place? Were you named after somebody in your family? Yeah, very interesting. Psychologists have also established that if a child is given a very, common, usual name, they are very likely to fit in the society comfortably. But if a child is given a very unusual name, they might have unusual life tendencies. Very interesting. A child who has a very unique name has also been established to eventually make very unique life choices. That's what psychologists established. That a name also affects your life choices. For example, somebody who was called Brain ended up being a neurosurgeon. Did the name push them to become a neurosurgeon? While as naming children common names is positive, it can also be negative because a child just feels like they are like everybody else. But the positive aspect is more because the child fits in comfortably. They feel like, hey, I'm just a normal David, I'm just a normal Susan. And like somebody is given a very weird name that sounds very different. So when a child has a common name, a usual name, they fit in easily. But we also have that positive aspect that when a child has a very unique name, they tend to have unique life choices, especially career choices and other life decisions. Very interesting findings by our psychologists. So tell me about your name. That name, do you love it? And then, should you find yourself with a name you don't like, can you change it? Yes, you can. There are legal provisions for you to change your name. Like you can swear an affidavit through a lawyer and have yourself a gazette notice for the change of your name. It's very possible in Kenya. It's very possible. And then parents, as we are naming our children, I think it's very important to choose names that have a significance. Regardless of our cultural backgrounds, I think let's look at the future of these children, because we don't want to give children names that will affect their self-esteem, that will affect their self-perception, that will even eventually give them an identity crisis. There's also another aspect of naming that's a bit interesting. Name signals, some names give you signals, a name can give you either a religious signal, a tribal signal. Like in our country where we have 42 tribes, there is a name that can be mentioned. You're like, this is from this tribe. That's a signal the name gives. So what signal does your name give? Leave alone the tribal, leave alone the common things. Does your name has another signal it sends across? Is it positive or negative? Do you like it? Are you proud of it? I think recently, this week, we had somebody with a very interesting name. Mauti Tamati Tamati Mauti. What a name. Then they end up doing something deadly. They end up maybe being murder suspects. What do you think motivates such a person with a name that suggests that Mauti is more of death? Then they end up doing, horrific things. I think parents need to take note of the names they give their children, whether it's because of the cultural practices, whether it's because of religious practices. I think we need to sit seriously and think about the names we give our children. It's important because it shapes their lives and eventually shapes their life outcome. Biblically, I'm a Christian, so I'm referring to what I know in my Bible. I don't know if the Quran has a provision for the naming patterns, but in the Bible, I think somebody would say that as your name is, so are you. I don't think it's a scripture, but I know there's a scripture in the book of Proverbs that says, as a man thinketh, so is he. And sometimes how you think is based on your name. So if your name makes you think negatively, you end up becoming negative. And in the Bible, we saw several people change their names and their outcome was positive. Like I think we had Jabez, whose story was of sorrow. They were born in sorrow. He was born in sorrow, changed his name, and something good came out. We have several Bible stories of people who changed their names and their outcome was positive. So it's very possible for you to change your name. But remember, it starts mentally. It starts with a mental overhaul. And I think that's what happened to me. As I grew up, my middle name is KAMENE. KAMENE is a Kamba name that means the hated one or the rejected one. Very interesting. I was named after my maternal grandmother. And that's cultural. Not that my mom hated me, not that she rejected me, but she named me after her mother, who she loved very much. A beautiful soul, may she rest in eternal peace. So I grew up with this name KAMENE that I was never proud of. And I remember at some point in primary school, I was loved. In school, I was loved. In primary and in secondary school, I oozed out love. I loved and I was loved back. And I remember one teacher in primary school saying, Evelyn, your name cannot be Kamene. I call you Kende. You know, Kende is the opposite of Kamene. But in Swahili, it has a very interesting meaning because it means, the testicles, one testicle. So I didn't like it because of the connotation it gave, and people were making fun of it in class, like Kende, ma Kende, it was so funny. So eventually I chose to have the name Mwende. At the back of my mind, I always wanted the name Mwende to just replace Kamene. So it was in my midlife, is it early adulthood? Early adulthood is when I really felt the impact of my name. I think I had very negative feelings about it, so it elicited a lot of negativity around me. And anytime something happened negatively, I always attributed it to my name. Especially if somebody rejected me or somebody treated me badly, I would always imagine it's my name that is eliciting this kind of bad treatment. But I thank God for counseling psychology because it changed my perspective, and I began to realize that you don't need to change your name. It has to do with your self perspective, self perception. How do you perceive yourself? Your self image. I began to change my self image and I began to have a positive self talk. That is what changed my life when I was doing counseling psychology. By the time I was done, my life was just changing and taking a different turn. I would speak to myself every morning like, Evelyn, you are a loved child, you are loved and you love back. You love humanity and you are loved. I kept telling that to myself over and over again in my self talk, in my prayers. I kept praying for love to manifest in my life. I didn't change my name immediately, but in my mind I knew something had changed. Even my outlook was a bit different. I was never this sad Kamene, I was now this bright faced Mwende. And I remember in 2012 I wanted to reinforce this name, like the name change of Kamene to Mwende. And I was going to a church in Nakuru, the Kingdom Seekers Fellowship, headed by Apostle William Kimani William, and I told him, hey, I want to change my name. So he was baptizing his members and he told me, come for the baptism. And I remember going to this river in Nakuru and we were baptized and my new name was Mwende. And I remember that it changed my narrative from this Kamene person to Mwende. I never changed my name in the ID, but in my mind it had changed. To date, it has changed. In fact, you call me Kamene and I'm always like, is that me? Because I resonate more with the name Mwende than Kamene. But of course, with time, I might want to change that. But what I know is that my mind has changed. It's only that there are people who will not just want to take you for who you are. They will take you as per your name tagging. And just like body shaming, there are people who will treat you according to your name. And psychologically, that has been established to happen, where people treat you according to your name. First impression matters. First impressions matter. I hear your name, I listen to you, and I'm like, your name in the first place puts me off. And of course, that's a lot of judging people. It gives people stigma when you treat people according to their names. It's not very interesting, especially if deep inside your heart, you're not proud of the name. And then this person tries to reinforce that feeling of, yes, you have a bad name. You have a terrible name. Who gave you that name? It makes you feel so bad. So you don't need to reinforce that negative feeling people have about their names. You don't know what people are struggling with when they have negative names, because some of them feel so desperate and hopeless that they cannot change them. But it's possible to change it. But it always starts with a mental overhaul. It all starts in the mind before it can manifest physically. Remember, you can call yourself a very good name, but still your mental processes haven't changed. Yeah. I like Winners Chapel. It's a church I've been to for many years. And I like how some of these pastors just began giving people, they call them covenant names. People would come to the church with native names and the pastor would just replace it with one covenant name like favor, wisdom, dominion. And with time, because I've been in the church for many years, I began to see these people who were given positive names manifest according to their names. I'm telling you, I've seen it happen practically. There are people I've grown up with There are people I've been to this church with, and you see the name they were given bear fruit in their lives. And with time as a parent, I got to just vow to myself never to give my children names they would hate, you know. That's why I have my children having very unique names. I love Swahili names with very positive meanings. Like I have Destiny Mapenzi, Mapenzi meaning love. I have Divine Furaha, Furaha meaning happiness. I have Princess Rehema meaning the mercies of God. I have Fadhili meaning goodness and charity, and it's just maybe it should be a philanthropist, Mfadhili Fulani hivi. And I'm looking at Ahadi, the last born. Her name means promises, the promises of God, and she's a promised child. So I have purpose to have my children keep positive names for their own future, for their own self-esteem, for their own psychological well-being. I don't know about you and your children. Would you want to change your children's names? Are you happy with the names they have? But more so, it's important to have them have a positive self-image and have it reinforced well, so that they value themselves and appreciate themselves, so that even when people don't appreciate them, they appreciate themselves. Thank you.